Will 2019 be the year we finally see an NHL offer sheet? It's been a long time since it's happened, and today I want to talk about the top 5 targets of players who would be the most likely to receive one should a team be brave enough to haul it out. We'll get into all that coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now, is this going to be the year of the offer sheet? There's all kinds of talk, all kinds of speculation about which teams might be using the offer sheet this year. This year's RFA class is probably one of the best ones we've ever seen. There is so many good, young, solid hockey players looking for some big, mega contracts here, and some of the teams that these players play for have a lot of salary cap issues, which certainly complicate things to get them paid and keep their rosters intact here. Now, before we jump into the top 5 list here, I wanted to remind you what the compensation model looks like should a team successfully get an RFA signed to an offer sheet. Now, obviously, we hear a lot about the max offer sheet because some of these top RFA players are going to be looking for mega bucks here, making big time money. So obviously, if a team offers the max offer sheet, which is based on a 5-year deal, it would be $10.568 million. So anything at that or above, the compensation going back the other way would be 4 first-round draft picks. Now, of course, the next tier down is from 8.45 to 10.5, which would give up 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and a third-round pick. Now, the tier below that, which would take us from $6.3 million down to $8.4 million, is a first, second, and third. Now, obviously, there's a couple of tiers left below that, and you can see the compensation model there on the screen. But the top 5 players we're discussing today, I feel, would all be at least in those top 3 categories. One other thing to keep in mind here as well is for the max offer sheet of the 4 first-round picks being the compensation model, is that can be paid over a 5-year span. Now, we have confirmation from NHL insider Chris Johnston, and I'll put this up here from Twitter, where it's been confirmed through the CBA that you only have to give up the 4 first-round picks over a 5-year period. I know there's been a lot of talk and speculation saying, well, this team doesn't have a 2020 first-round pick, so they wouldn't even have the required picks to be able to make an offer sheet here anyways, but that's actually not entirely true. At this point in time, no NHL team has traded their first-round picks for 2021 or beyond. Now, there are some teams that don't have a 2020 first-rounder, but everybody has them from 2021 and on. So at this point, every NHL team technically would have the first-round picks available to do a max offer sheet. So now let's jump into the top 5 players I think are the most likely to be receiving an offer sheet. Now, at number 5, I'm putting Toronto Maple Leafs forward Mitch Marner. There's been all kinds of talk about Marner, probably because of the fact he plays in Toronto, one of the largest fan bases. And of course, a lot of the media really focuses a lot on that team. And obviously, the RFA market seems to be waiting on Mitch Marner before many other players really get deep into negotiations here. A lot of these other agents and players seem to be waiting for Marner to go first. It's really quite unclear at this point when Marner and the Leafs very well could come to an agreement. But now that we're into the RFA interview period, NHL insider Darren Dreger has mentioned here numerous times that he feels that Marner will be meeting with about 4 to 5 other NHL clubs, and he really feels that there's a strong possibility of an offer sheet coming out. He said that he was told by another high-ranking NHL executive that he feels there's going to be an offer sheet, not necessarily on Marner, but to one of these RFAs in the teens of millions of dollars. So that would be $13 million or more. Now, in my personal opinion, that sounds absolutely ridiculous and insane. I'm not sure that any of these RFA players have earned a contract more than the NHL's top paid player, which would be Connor McDavid at this point in time. To offer $13 or $14 million like on a 5-year contract for any of these guys to give up 4 first-round picks, I think would be incredibly dumb. I really don't see the point here of doing that. That's an awful lot of money, and I'm not sure that as good as any of these players are, that they would really be worth that type of compensation. You could potentially really mess up your team's future by giving away that much and spending that much money on one player. Now, a lot of the teams that are in cap crunches are in cap crunches because they have a lot of high-paid players, and it's hard to manage the rest of your roster. So to tie up that much money in even one player really does not make a lot of sense here in my opinion. But that's what Dreger is being fed here from other NHL executives, and I'm just not quite sure that it's going to go that far. As far as Marner goes, though, it looks like he and his camp are driving a very hard bargain here with the Leafs. He clearly seems to want Austin Matthews' money. The NHL insiders indicate that he won't take anything less. And until the Leafs come up with probably about a 5-year contract, maybe a 6-year contract at most, around $11 million, that they're not going to get anything done here. Obviously, Marner feels he's just as valuable as Tavares and or Matthews, wants to be paid appropriately, and I honestly don't blame him. The only thing that goes against him here is the fact that he's a playmaking winger, and these guys are goal-scoring center icemen, and typically they're not really used as comparables when comparing to a playmaking winger. I mean, if you ask Marner who his comparable is, he's going to say Tavares and Matthews, whereas most other people would disagree and feel he's more comparable to some of the other top wingers, like a Nikita Kucherov or a Mark Stone or something in that neighborhood, which make around like the $9 to $9.5 million range. But of course, that's not how he and his camp are looking at things at this point. At least that's what we're led to believe here. But I do believe Mitch Marner is a strong candidate here for an offer sheet. As we know, the Maple Leafs have their own series of salary cap issues that they need to deal with. And based on how negotiations are going, would not be a complete shocker. I do believe Mitch Marner wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. Don't get me wrong here. I don't want Leaf fans coming on saying that I think he's going to leave or that he wants to leave. I don't think any of that is the case at all. But I do believe if Marner signs an offer sheet that his intent is to force the Leafs' hand to pay him what he feels he deserves. And that would be the only reason he would do it. The only thing you have to caution yourself here, Mr. Marner, is that could backfire on you, and they very well could choose to take the compensation instead of giving you your money. And of course, then they would have the opportunity as well to turn around and go offer sheet somebody else to get another strong young player into their camp and give up that same compensation here. They very well actually might come out further ahead by doing that. So I do urge a lot of these RFAs to proceed with caution, because if they're using that strictly as a negotiating tool and they don't want to leave, it very well could backfire on. Now, next up, I've got Patrik Laine of the Winnipeg Jets. Now, the Jets certainly have a lot of salary cap issues on their own here. They just traded Jacob Trouba to free up space. They couldn't afford to keep him. They have a lot of other players. It's not just Laine. It's Kyle Connor as well. They got a lot of holes on their D-core now because of pending free agents and trading Jacob Trouba. And they certainly are at a spot where they need to make some deals, and they need to make them here quickly so they can free up some money to get these RFAs paid. Now, Patrik Laine, I'm not sure exactly what he's wanting for a contract, but I would think the Winnipeg Jets are probably going to go to a bridge deal here, probably 3 to 4 years tops, and they're probably going to try to keep that AAV down because of the fact that Laine didn't have a great season this past year. But I wouldn't be completely shocked to see another team that comes along and says, you know what, we really believe in Patrik Laine. We have no doubt he's going to be a consistent 40-plus goal man. We have no problem ponying up to pay him $11 or $12 million on a longer-term contract, because obviously over time that contract very well might pay for itself, and down the road in a few years it might look like a little bit more of a bargain potentially, depending on what we see with salary caps rising or whatever over the next few years. So I don't think it's quite likely it's maybe some of the guys higher up in this list, but I do think players like Laine or Mitch Marner below him are certainly prime candidates to be considered for an offer sheet. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning and Brayden Point. Now, Brayden Point is slowly becoming one of the NHL's top players. He's incredibly fast, incredibly offensive, can play in all situations, and the Tampa Bay Lightning, like these other teams, have salary cap issues and need to make some changes. Now, they certainly are well on their way to solving their salary cap issues, so I do feel like, the possibility is not as strong as it was a week or two ago for him to receive an offer sheet, or at least they're more in a position to match if it did happen. They traded JT Miller, which freed up over $5 million in cap space. They found out that Ryan Callahan has a degenerative back condition and won't be able to play anymore. They were going to try to trade that contract, but now it'll go on LTIR so they can free up cap space that way. So between those two moves, they just freed up a bunch of cap space. But of course, Brayden Point is not their only contract they need to look after here. So because of that, I do think he's still a possibility that if somebody comes in with a big number on an offer sheet, it still very well could happen. But like the other two below him, I'm not real convinced yet that it's a high likelihood that it's going to happen. But Brayden Point, to me, would be a prime candidate. Why wouldn't you want this guy on your team? He can play center ice. He's a solid two-way guy. He's incredibly fast. He's becoming a pretty solid, 90-point player. He's going to be one of the NHL's brightest players for a long period of time, and I strongly would urge the Lightning to get him locked up long-term if they can. But a lot of these newer RFAs are really looking to cash in big time here. One thing that Tampa has to his advantage here, as well as the state of Florida has no state income taxes, so they could probably get away with paying him a little bit less than he would have to be paid elsewhere and still get the same or better net income. So we'll see what happens with Brayden Point. Again, I don't know if the likelihood is really high, but I can see him being a player that teams would be very, very interested in with this process. Next two on my list, I think, are the most likely to receive an offer sheet, and I do think the likelihood would be higher by a fair bit here than the other three we've already talked about. Now, next up here at number 2, I'm putting San Jose Sharks forward Timo Meyer. Now, we've seen the Sharks obviously have their own salary cap issues, largely due to that massive contract they just gave defenseman Erik Karlsson on an 8-year deal. That was an absolutely insane contract. I really didn't think Karlsson would be able to demand that much money, but because of that, they put themselves in a bit of a pickle here. Even their captain, Joe Pavelski, who's in a UFA right now, is going to be meeting with other teams and very well could walk. They don't have Pavelski signed. They don't have Jumbo Joe Thornton signed. Timo Meyer needs a new contract. Kevin LeBanc needs a new contract. And they have holes on their decor that they need to fill here as well. So the San Jose Sharks do have a fairly serious cap issue, and Timo Meyer's a player that I think is a very attractive option. He's proven that he can be a solid guy in the playoffs. He can be a 30-plus goal man, and really to come in with possibly like a $6 or $7 million offer sheet, that might be enough to get this done here that the Sharks may not be able to match. And because of the bracket he would fall into, you'd only have to give up a first, second, and third. I think there's a lot of teams out there with a player that's as good as Meier and as young as he is that will have no problem offering that up as compensation here as well. Now, there could be some situations arise where teams might call another team talking about a trade and threaten to do an offer sheet and work out a trade that might be a little bit more favorable for both sides as well. I've seen that happen or heard of it happening in the past, and it wouldn't be completely shocking here again. But really, for that type of compensation that Meier would end up having to give up for, I really think that that's a pretty good value. He's not going to be demanding the kind of money like some of these other guys. He's not going to be a $9 or $10 million guy, so the compensation is going to be much less, but it would still be just as big a blow to the Sharks to try to match it or to lose him as well. So I think he is one of the most prime targets in the NHL for this process. Now, in my opinion, the most likely target right now for an offer sheet is Carolina Hurricanes forward Sebastian Aho. Now, you might say, you're a little bit crazy on that one. They got tons of cap space. Why wouldn't they match a mega offer for Aho? He's by far their most important player right now. And you know what? That's all valid points and very well might prove to be true. I've heard comments from GM Don Waddell saying that they weren't concerned over offer sheets and they would match, but I don't expect him to say anything else. No GM is going to come out and say, yeah, you know what? I'm really nervous about this. If my players offered $9 or $10 million, I can't do anything about it, so we're going to lose them, and we're going to have to just take the picks and carry on. Like, they're not going to do that. Obviously, they're going to talk like they have a plan here and not really sweat it too much. But one thing to keep in mind is the Carolina Hurricanes owner, Tom Dundon, recently lost $70 million on that football league that he was investing in, and is really looks like they might be going down a road here of kind of cutting back some salary here. We've seen reports about negotiations with some of their UFAs are not going well. They met with Justin Falk, who's due for an extension, and obviously that didn't go quite well. Suddenly he's being talked about in trades. They can't seem to sign either of their goalies, in Mrazek or McElhinney. So that gives me a lot of concerns over maybe what the internal budget might be in Carolina. So if another team with deep pockets comes along and slaps a 5-year contract that's front-loaded, full of bonuses with Sebastian Aho, and he wants to take advantage of that, I'm not sure that the Carolina Hurricanes can actually handle that. Let's say another team comes along and offers him, let's just say, $10, $11 million per year, with a big chunk of that being salary bonus, and it's front loaded, so a lot of it would be paid, say, in the first 2 years. Then I really don't see a situation where the Carolina Hurricanes would be in a position to match that. Now, of course, Tom Dundon might find a way to suck it up and keep the player, but that would be a difficult task for a team in that financial position, in my opinion, to match. So when you're looking at some of the teams that have the deeper pockets now, unfortunately, a lot of those guys also have their own version of salary cap issues. So it might be a little bit unlikely because of the teams we're talking about. But if any of the teams who have the space and can do it, have the kind of cash flow that they can do a front-loaded mega contract for Aho, then obviously that would be problematic for Carolina. Look to a team like the Colorado Avalanche, for example, who has tons of cap space. I mean, another trade today, trading out Carl Soderberg. They've got almost $40 million in cap space. They're not a cash-poor team. I think they would be a prime team to possibly be offering up an offer sheet. Now, we're probably going to be doing a video in the next 24 hours discussing which teams we think are most likely to be handing these out here as well. But these are the top 5 players, and I think Aho is a serious candidate because of the financial position here of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, keep in mind here as well, one other thing that a lot of people don't realize, if an NHL team matches an offer sheet, so if any of these guys receive and sign an offer sheet and they're matched, they cannot be traded within a year's time as well. So in the Aho example that I just gave, if the Carolina Hurricanes want to sign and match that contract and keep the player, they can't trade him for a year. So they can't match it and then try to trade him to get out of the contract. That's not something they can do. They have to keep him for at least 1 year's time after that contract is matched. So that would put them in a very difficult position here. So of course, as always, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions on which players you think are most likely that would be prime candidates to receive an offer sheet this summer. Or are we even going to see an offer sheet? I do think it's not super likely here, but these are the guys I think that are most likely should it actually happen. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy, so stay tuned for plenty more content. We are in a very busy NHL news cycle right now with free agency and trades and everything coming up, so stay tuned to Top Shelf Hockey. I'll keep you all up to date with all the breaking news. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.